All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Super Kami Guru Alucard here once again. And today, for live album discussions, we will talk about my newest release, A Point Prove, which dropped December 1st. So, this album actually was recorded and finished long before SKGA Goes to Japan. I was in the middle of doing that one when I came up with some of the songs for it. A lot of the songs were actually excerpts that had been recorded or partially recorded during the time I was working on a few of the previously released albums, including the songs with the SOS Brigade Quartet. So there was a quite sort of long period of several months where I worked on these songs, and then I finally compiled them together. I actually set this one to be released before I had even released Dark Cloud Volume 1. So before I had anything done for that album, this one was already set to be released on this date. And I just figured it was kind of I wanted an album to drop in December because it was 1 month I had never released an album in yet at that point. So I was like, okay, I'll set it for December. Then I've actually released at least one album in December. So that's how that came about. And then, of course, everything that I had actually recorded after SKGA Goes to Japan all took place before that one was released. So all these albums coming out were actually recorded long before SKGA Goes to Japan was released. So they're all kind of older songs that I divided into albums once I had completed SKGA Goes to Japan. I decided I would slowly release them all while I sort of go on a break, a hiatus, we'll say, and come up with ideas for new material, but also focus on other things, which brings us to the topic of when I'm going to do the Stephen King book reviews. Now, I decided this Monday I'm going to do one, and I might do one a week just to catch up on the 26 books I have read so far. And I was thinking of doing a ranking video at the end, but I'm not sure if 30 is really a small number. I mean, when you take into fact that Stephen King has published over 70 books, I kind of wonder if 30 is a small number to really rank them as what I would say is the best, because there's so many more out there that might rank higher than what I have. But if anybody's watching, please comment and let me know if you think 30 is a good enough number. Because if it is, I might do one. And then let's say I read more down the road, I could always come back, revisit it, and decide like where I would rank them and see if things actually are different later on with more sort of in the basket to compare to. But yeah, I will definitely do a review at least of everything I have read, and I will do probably one a week starting this Monday coming up. And I was thinking I'm not going to do them live, but I'm going to try and have them recorded to post about 7 p.m. on Monday. I'm going to pre-record them just because with these, I want to do certain effects to throw the title in there, and also that way I can kind of prepare what I'm going to say based on, reviewing how I felt about the book, what I liked about it, what I didn't like, and overall where my standing opinion would be as far as like a rating. So that's the plans for the future coming up. Now, to get back on track to what we're talking about, the live album discussion, with A Point to Prove, this album is sort of the trendsetter as well as Dark Cloud 1, that the next albums for quite some time will only have 10 tracks. It's going to be a theme I'm probably going to go for a good chunk of time, unless the mood strikes me to do it differently. Because if I release 10 songs on an album, I can get to the overall goal I've had for a long time. This goes back to high school, even when I had wanted to do 500 albums, like sort of break the record of most albums ever recorded, right? And the current holder of that record's got over 400 and something albums, a guy named Buckethead. So that's why I decided I was going to try to go for 500, because then not only have I beat the record, but I'm decently far ahead at that point that it might be tough for any artist to, catch up. And if so, it would take them a lot of time and they would have to record a lot of music. So that's why 10 seems like a good number, just because people tend to like smaller albums nowadays, because, in this generation, the attention span isn't really as big as it used to be, perhaps, right? Plus, I think 10 is a good number because it's a comfortable, well-rounded number. It's long enough to be a full album, but it's not overly long that, like, unless you have some really good points, people might start to get bored. 10 is a good, well-rounded one. In fact, in the future, if I was to do more than 10, I might stick with 10 to 20. I don't know if I would do more than, 18 again. I might, if the album, like with SKGA, the story struck me that I couldn't divide it in two albums and I had 20 tracks. So it just kind of decided itself to be a 20-track album. Now, like I said, I might do 12, 15, but to do another 20 album, I might try to divide it in parts and do two parts instead of doing another 20-track album. So 10 will probably be the standing number for a good while. Maybe after we crack into the 100 album mark, just to celebrate getting that far and having recorded that much music, maybe I'll do a longer album, but we'll see. Anyways, the album starts off with Neville's intro, which features an insert snippet sample of Neville Goddard talking about people thinking he was insane for what he was teaching, and sort of the funny way he sort of makes it almost an inspiring sort of challenge in the statement. And I really like that. It comes from the lecture titled The Secret Power, which is available on YouTube. And of course, I liked what he said. So I played a bit of piano with it and just kind of went with the mood of what he was describing. And I thought it turned out very cool. And I thought it was a good way to start the album, because when you get challenged like that, it feels like you have a point to prove. So that really takes us into the start of the album. The second track, titled after the album, A Point to Prove, features Retrospect. And this was a beat that was actually made by Dotanuki. And I played sax on it, I rap, I did the chorus, and Retrospect did a verse. Now, the cover with this one is actually a computer-generated image of what the planet Namek from Dragon Ball Z would look like in real life. That, in case people were wondering what that is, what's it from, that's what it is. So, A Point to Prove really, cements the idea of, proving like, hey, I'm still here and I'm still going to keep going. Nothing's stopping me. And here we go. Which this is Live Album Discussions 18. So if you include the 5 albums I did with the SOS Brigade Quartet, in total, I have 18 released albums. There's plenty more coming. I mean, by the time I'm done everything, once it's all released, everything I have recorded so far, we will be looking at 30 albums in total, 25 solo and 5 with the SOS Brigade Quartet, which I would love to make more music with them, but they've just kind of been distant and haven't been replying to my emails. So I guess that's the end until one day they decide to maybe come back and do something, which I'd be open to doing. But really, the whole point of that band was the 3 or 4 of us, when there was a 4th member, sort of filling in the gap. Working on everything together, though, was the whole point of it. And that's what makes it different from just my solo albums, right? Whereas everything is mostly done by me. with a few contributors here and there. Whereas that one, we all kind of worked on things together. It was a group sort of effort. And that's what makes the difference, which I'd be open to doing, but it's up to them. So back to what I was saying. Now you understand the cover, you understand sort of the concept of the story in the direction we're going, and we get into track number 3, which is Miso Soup. Pure instrumental track, which there is 3 on this record. And this one is kind of just it's sort of a melody about how I really like Miso Soup, and I guess you could say the mood or emotion to it, because it is purely instrumental, is it was exciting to get Miso Soup when I went to Japan. It was sort of my train of thought thinking before I went there that I'll get to have the good Miso Soup that's in Japan when I go there. And even like having the packets that I got there as a souvenir to bring back with me that actually are pretty close, or damn close anyway, to like, how Miso Soup is in Japan. That sort of mood and excitement and enjoyment is really the feeling or the vibe behind that one. And, it's sort of like a good instrumental break, because we really established some deep points right in the beginning of the record. So it's kind of to relax the audience for a lot of the other deeper concepts that are going to come in later. Next, we have Kristen's song, which was a request from this girl named Kristen who lives in Gravenhurst to make her a song. And basically, she pretended to like me. Then she started playing games. And I just got like, I had made the song for her, but I was pissed off that she thought she could just kind of use me to make a song and then ghost me and treat me like shit. She even had this one friend of hers, after I told her off for doing it and blocked her, freaking message me and try to start World War III talking shit to me. So you know what? That's why the song is the nice way I originally wrote it for the song, but I couldn't just release it unfinished like that because of that situation. So her friend unknowingly actually, you know, poured gasoline on an already raging fire. And that's why when I did decide, okay, I'm going to release it, but I'm going to end the story exactly the way it really is. So that's why there's the joke and the outro at the end where I'm saying, like, oh, yeah, she was just a cunt, and, just basically throwing shit on her. Like, the whole song's kind of a nice song that I made in an attempt to court her, as they say, but she was a bitch anyway. And like, she wasn't really that great, but I was trying to be nice, and at first she seemed nicer than she actually was. There's many women who do that nowadays, and I hate that shit. But that's basically why I did the outro, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna release the song like that. Fuck it, at least it's keeping it real still, right? So next, we get into Namekian Business, which is a song where I use samples from Dragon Ball Z Abridged, like the parts with Grand Elder Guru in them. They were like really funny samples that, kind of what he says became my stage name. So I took those samples and kind of threw it in there like an old school vibe. And then the whole Namekian Business concept is like reflecting the idea that's on the cover of, like, sort of a Namekian atmosphere, a Namekian landscape. Super Kami Guru Alucard, not a normal earthling. I'm quite a unique individual. You would think I was some sort of albino Namekian, which is funny because they made that joke in Dragon Ball Z Abridged, right? So that's the concept of that. And at this point, we're halfway into the album. Now, most of these beats were done by me, with the exception of A Point to Prove. And this one was actually done by Lone Wolf, the main instrumental anyway. But the rest, all me. Like Neville's intro, the piano is me, Miso Soup, all me, Kristen's song, me, Namekian Business, Lone Wolf, A Point to Prove, Do Tanuki, and the next one, Fujimura Yu no Uta, I believe is what it's called. Let me just because it is a long title, I want to make sure I wrote it right. Because it's long enough, I could have wrote it wrong. Okay. Fujimura Yu no Tameni, which basically means for you, Fujimura, who was a friend of mine. I talked to her for a while, who was really nice, and I supported her sort of in her business, and she said things. I haven't talked to her in a long time, but she's married. She's got her own life going on, but very nice person. So, because she was very positive and encouraging, I decided I would just, use her as sort of an inspiration and make her a song that kind of reflected, how it would feel to live the daily life in Japan, working with her business the way it was. A sort of simple, nice, peaceful melody that really captured the vibe and sort of the appearance that she gave me. So that's basically where that idea came from. With instrumental songs, because there's no words, you have to really base it around a feeling, a mood. And that's what music is. You either capture it with words if you have lyrics, or you try to just make the music reflect like sort of the background, the scenery, the image, the vibe of how what you're expressing musically is. And that's why I say, yeah, I'm a rapper and I play sax and I sing, but really, as a jazz artist, I also have to be a composer at certain times and just make music that can reflect sort of a story without words, which is a challenge. I do admit that, but it's kind of a challenge I like because if you can do it good, you don't always need words. People could hear it and really pick up the vibe. And I think when you explain that to the audience too, if they're not sure what the feeling is of the melody, it becomes a lot more clear once they have the artist interpretation. But even before it, or if they didn't get it, it would be up to them to really decide what the music is trying to tell them through just the instrumental. So that's track number 6. Track 7 is Japan is Where My Heart's At. And that song was inspired for someone named Otani, who I helped out with money. And she actually ghosted me and was kind of dry after. I think she was a real person, but I think she regretted that she had gotten herself into a difficult situation where she felt she would be indebted to me. So she fled. But before that, when things were good and we were talking and she was a good friend, I ended up making her this song. And then the reason I kept it and didn't really do anything bad with it was that feeling, even if it faded for a specific person, still kind of remained. Like, even without her, Japan is still where my heart at. And I still like, the idea of going back there next year, and I loved it there. So ultimately, my heart's still there. That's not really a bad sort of ending to the story. It's, if anything, that song would be a case example of why that's where my heart's at and why I like it there so much. It just, furthers the point. And then the next song, Boredom, is kind of a jokey song about how, by the way, Japan is Where My Heart's At. That was one of the few, in fact, the only one on this record that was produced by Tone Jones. So there were 3 producers who contributed tracks to this album, but the other 7 were me. But yeah, this Japan is Where My Heart's At is number 7. Number 8, Boredom. That's one I did all myself, and I used more sort of Dragon Ball Z abridged samples just to kind of get the point I was going for. And it's like, as a rapper, I'm very lyrical. There's not many rappers nowadays who are as lyrical as me, and even from the old school ones before me, there weren't really anybody who quite did it the way I am. So I'm sort of like the bloodthirsty contender who's so gruesome in like sort of a lyrical battle ring that not many rappers would dare step against, as far as like making songs against or challenging them, because I'm so wordy. And plus, I've made so many albums now that it's almost like it's boring in a sense that there's no challenge. I mean, it's successful in its own way that I've become that good that I could really say, wow, there's not even a challenge anymore. Like, I could just write lyrics and kill it. And like, I would come up with these like sort of impossible to beat lyrics, and there wouldn't even be an answer to it really, because I'm the only one who sort of developed this unique rhyme style. So there is a boring sense of no challenge to it, but the idea behind where the boredom stems from is kind of a cool one that I thought about. Like, really, what I'm saying is, I've just climbed so high up the mountain that there's not any sort of company here around me. It's kind of funny when I think about it like that. And that's why I actually really like that song, because it's not like some people might get the conception that the song is about being bored or the song is boring. No, really, what the song is saying is there is a sense of boredom because I've done so much with music already and because I've become so skilled at it. But it's also kind of its own achievement, which makes it a really sort of complex song. And that's why I love it. I love the idea behind it. And then next we get to the final instrumental composition, which is A Long Forgotten Place So Far Away. And that one's a really nice one that I kind of just I was relaxing one day and I just kind of came up with the melody, and I just, I grabbed my sax and I played along with it. I played a lot of the other instrumentation on it too, and I slowly just laid out all the parts. And it was just sort of a feeling I got from listening to a Chet Baker cover of one of the standards he did. And just the feeling of looking out my window at like the escarpment in my backyard and everything. And then thinking about how in the future, like I would go to Japan, and sort of these feelings and ideas all kind of came together. And that became like the inspiration to make this instrumental. And I think it turned out really nice. I actually really like that one as kind of cool, relaxing, smooth jazz instrumental music. And then, of course, we get to our last song, Song for Japanese Friends, which I did because over time I realized that most of my best friends are actually Japanese. Most are in Japan, or, they might be in other places too, but they generally usually are Japanese. And it's sort of a song of being grateful because even though I don't have many friends here, of all the friends I do have all over the world, the Japanese ones have been the most loyal friends. They've been the biggest influence on me as a person, as an artist, and everything else. And just sort of a nice way of saying thank you. And that song's really, it's a nice song because it's straight from the heart. I mean, I didn't even really feel like rapping on that one because it was just a nice way of getting the message across. And of course, when I was singing it, finding the rhythm that went to the beat, I haven't enjoyed doing that as much since I did the song from my gospel rap album, Close to Me, which an original version of that actually appeared on one of my old mixtapes before that even saw the light of day. So that's what's cool about that. And I really enjoyed coming up with like the harmony I sang on that song, and with the idea behind it too. I felt like it was a nice song because I really made it for all my friends. I didn't make it to, court some girl or win her favor, or do it for myself as trying to, show myself or prove myself. But at the same point, why I think it's a great song to end the album is that it kind of proves the point that there really is a well-rounded mix to this entire album. Like, you get to hear some great rapping, you get to hear some great jazz instrumental compositions and playing. You get to really hear some nice harmonies even when things are sung. So the idea that everything could sort of be mixed together in such a nice way is, it proves that okay, I mix all these different kinds of music together. But if I was to just focus on one or the other, I could do an equally good job with all of them. And that's what I really like as sort of the ending theme for the album. So that's the album in a nutshell. That brings us, of course, to track number 10, The Completion. And it's a short album, but I think it's really nice. And over time, I really have developed an appreciation for it because the fact is, with this album, it all came about so naturally. I could honestly say these songs all just came from a natural feeling of life along the way. Like it's not like I sat there and thought, okay, I need to come up with a song for this album. Or I need to come up with several. Okay, what can I make the song about? Sometimes I do that, but with this album, these songs just kind of floated down as ideas along the way, and I just kind of compiled them until I had enough to make the 10-track album. Another thing I will say, as sort of an interesting piece of bonus trivia about this record, is that, believe it or not, there were actually four other tracks that exist for this album that won't be released because I don't have them anymore. But the interesting thing was, I had made a copy of this because I completed it quite a while ago compared to some of my other more recent releases, right? But I had made a copy for retrospect because he's on the song A Point to Prove. Sort of a way of, giving my thanks and letting him get sort of a sneak preview. Now, there were four other songs that I felt they were poorly mixed. And even after I mastered them, they just didn't really stand out well. I didn't really care for them. I felt like I had outgrown them, but I had put them on this CD that Retrospect actually has. And those four tracks are there. Tracks that will never see the light of day unless I redo them or something. But those versions are long gone and they didn't make the cut. But Retrospect would have four songs of mine that won't be released, that I don't have anymore, that won't see the light of day. And the ironic and funny thing about that is back when I was recording all those old mixtapes in high school, when I was 12 gauge still before I became MC Key or CRM and released anything professional on here, a lot of those mixtapes never saw the light of day. They were songs that were recorded, never really mixed or mastered, and they just kind of faded into obscurity on whatever, burned CD that people got at the time because I would sell them, I would give them away, all this. So those songs are out there, the same as those four on one CD, but nobody will ever see the light of day of them unless they decide to give me a copy and one day I remaster them. Of course, technology with that is always advancing. So who knows? It could happen one day. But unless I actually got the CDs back, there'd be no way to get them because they're out there only for those people until, such a day ever comes, if miraculously it does, right? But I find that funny too because when I tried to get some of my old music back from my teachers at Cathedral High School, I had asked them because there were a few of my earlier mixtapes that were some of my favorites. Like I thought I made the best music on, and I wanted them back. And I said, like, if you lend me it, if you can get me a copy of it, I'll give it back to you. I just want to save the files on my computer because I don't have any of that stuff anymore. And of course, the teachers all hogged it and won't give it back or say they lost it or something. Everybody had some sort of excuse. The point is, I don't know where any of that mixtape music is now. And there was about 20 or so CDs of that stuff out there that will never see the light of day. That's just out there in either the teachers or the specific students' hands that I don't have, that they won't give me, or they lost or something. And who knows what happened to it or where it will ever be. So it just kind of makes me laugh because with A Point to Prove, that's the first time since the high school times when four tracks actually were kind of lost over time, because it wasn't until I was releasing this album and after I had gotten rid of the tracks that I remembered Retrospect CD and thought about those 4 songs that disappeared. But I have the lyrics to those. So with those songs, I actually might remake them one day and hopefully do a better job with them. So those songs aren't completely lost to time the way some of those old mixtapes were. Those are gone. I don't have the lyrics. I can remember what beats went to some of them. I don't even remember the words really because that was like over 10 years ago. Now we're talking, right? So yeah, I have no idea. But who knows? Maybe one day we'll see them again somehow. It would be funny if I ever got my hands on some of those. I'd probably just release them privately on my YouTube channel just for kind of shits and giggles to see, like, to show people, like, okay, this is where it all started and look how far we've come. But yeah, that's pretty much the end of the presentation today. Shout outs to Ads Up in here for checking out. Hope you enjoyed the backstories of Point to Prove. And yeah, Monday, everybody keep an eye out on the channel because the first Stephen King review of my review series, now that we've read 26 books, we're going to go through them one a week. This one's going to be Desperation. So definitely check it out if you're free. And of course, feel free to comment too and let me know if you think 30 is a small number to do a whole sort of ranking video on, if I should wait till I read more, or if you think 30 is a good start and we could do another one later with more. Either way works. But also, of course, if you have read it or you have any questions about if it's good or what you would like to know in case you were to read it one day, feel free to comment those as well. Anyways, till next time, I'm your host, Super Kami Guru Alucard, and peace out.